Current and former residents of NWA, what's your, I'll never live in NWA again, story? When my folks moved into their home, they noticed a couple of dead trees and had someone take them down. The tree guy suggested they take down 2 more leaning trees that were likely to fall down if they got hit with high winds. My dad scheduled the second round of trees to come down a couple weeks later. In the interim, the HOA contacted my parents and said that they had unapproved work done by removing the dead trees and that they would have to get HOA approval to remove any more. My dad had the tree guy send over a report about the dangerous trees to the HOA. The HOA refused to allow my parents to take the trees down. My dad canceled the appointment with the tree guy. Fast forward 3 weeks and a hurricane blows through, which isn't unexpected since this is Florida in September. Like the tree guy predicted, both leaning trees came down and completely destroyed the neighbor's roof. The neighbor was pretty cool about it, but his insurance tried to get my parents to pay for it, claiming they knew the trees were dangerous and didn't have them removed. My parents sent along the rejection letter from the HOA and told the insurance company to have a chat with them instead. I'm not sure what happened beyond that, but I know my parents didn't have to pay. My old house's backyard bordered in HOA community. Our house was built 30 years before the community was built, so we weren't part of it. We used to get notices about violations and fines if we didn't correct them. Never did correct them. They finally sent legal papers to repossess our house. Went to court with a tax map that showed our property not part of the HOA community. Judge dismissed their suit against us and found them guilty of harassment. We didn't get awarded much, but I made sure to break every rule of theirs I could until we moved. No huge issues, just up to the minute griping about every little thing. We were in the middle of moving in and got a nastygram about some boxes on the side of the house, waiting to go out with recycle. Got another one about our lawn right after it was scalped and winter grass planted. They apparently didn't approve of nature's time frame on growing grass. Moved back to the old neighborhood, no HOA, and city code takes care of 90% of the BS, weeds, general eyesores, nuisances, etc. No HOA ever again. I have no plans of putting a weight bench in my front yard, but damn it, I want the option. My wife's aunt and uncle live in an HOA neighborhood. Their current problem is that the ground is higher than their first level and it's sloped towards a group of condos. Every time as rain's bad, their condos flood. They don't have basements. HOA won't do anything and it seems a few of their residents are lawyering up. This has happened since they put in a storm drain and for some reason it backs up into their common area which is behind the group of condos. HOA lost paperwork for change of ownership when we bought our house. They sent us letters saying there would be a lien placed on our home if we didn't pay the overdue amounts plus over $200 of late fees. I had to call them 3 times to even get someone on the phone who knew how to help me. Then I contacted escrow who said they had already not only sent all the paperwork, but turns out we had already paid the fees. Called HOA again and they were insistent that we hadn't paid or sent over paperwork. Called escrow again and requested they contact the HOA themselves to sort this out and HOA still insisted we owed a late fee. Started losing my shit until escrow said they would pay the late fee. A month later we got a letter in the mail saying we were being fined for leaving our trash bins out longer than necessary. Duck HOA. I was putting on new siding, very obviously too, had ladders up and everything. But there was just plywood up one morning on part of my house, facing the street. I got a knock on the door at 7:30 a.m. A code enforcement officer, in uniform, looking vaguely like a cop, was visibly upset and acting like I'd taken a dump on the front sidewalk or something. Told me if I didn't have the siding up by the end of the day I'd start getting fined every day. There were 366 units spread out on over 200 plus acres of land. One of the residents got fined $1,250 for putting outdoor Christmas lights on 2 trees in front of their unit, outdoor decorations being prohibited beyond residents' front door entryway. I got a HOA violation for my neighbor's vines growing into my yard. I'm being charged $400 because of a violation for a bush overhanging my walkway. I don't have a walkway. Or a bush. The picture isn't even my house. They won't back down. I love reading contracts and agreements, so when a friend of mine told me about his HOA troubles and not letting him keep his boat behind his house, I jumped on the opportunity. After reading, sourcing and finding a few rulings, I learned that they have very little power to enforce what they can't see from the road, which affects property value. He took my documentation to the HOA and requested that they remove his fines. They refused, saying, "The agreement says nag nag nag," and after a few months he finally paid a real estate lawyer $2,000 to go talk circles around the HOA and they finally backed down, removed his fines and allowed him to keep his boat. Then out of pure spite and with my design we built a 40 feet tall, temporary, structure, conforming to both the HOA agreement and building code to fly a flag on a further 25 feet pole. We took it down and put it back up every 3 months for a year. You could see it from almost anywhere in the neighborhood. It was a real triumph and it was hideous. My daughter was a lifeguard at the pool in our community and they weren't allowed to give out certain equipment, it was for swimming lessons. One day the HOA president asks for equipment and my daughter says no as she was instructed. The HOA president actually says, "Do you know who I am?" Then he proceeded to call her boss. When I was a kid, my parents had a house in a nice cul-de-sac, but it was a working-class neighborhood. The transmission in my truck took a doo-doo, so I replaced it in our driveway. A few days later we got a letter citing a clause stating all improvements done on property must be done by a licensed contractor. It was a far reach, but they stood by it as there was nothing in the CC&Rs against working on personal vehicles. My dad made me pay him back for the fine, but for a while afterwards I'd go put some oil or coolant under the HOA president's cars and hope he wasting money chasing a non-existent problem. My grandparents lived in an old folks community with a zealous HOA. My grandmother had to go to the hospital, cause of her many health problems. My grandfather would go with her. This happened once when I was visiting. There was a knock on the door at about 10 a.m. Two elderly women with clipboards immediately jump into a speech about how the trash cans hadn't been brought in. I explained the situation. One of them said she was in the hospital the previous week but still managed to bring in her trash can and handed me what looked like a ticket for $50. Duck. That shit. This sort of fits. I lived with my wife in officer housing on a military installation. Of course we had to follow certain rules so everything looked ship-shape. That wasn't hard to do. What did get under my skin was the colonel driving around, taking notes, and then having her underlings issue tickets to residents for minor infractions. The one that sticks in my mind was the suckers, as they were called. I had never heard the term before. Although I kept my grass mowed per regulation, the little maple tree seeds would sprout up overnight and be an inch taller than the grass. I got a ticket for suckers in my lawn, even though the grass was freshly mowed. Okay, sure, I'll just mow the lawn every goddamn day. Sheesh. I never lived under an HOA, but that experience was enough for me to realize HOAs weren't my thing. I live in Florida and have the pleasure of living in an HOA neighborhood while not being a part of the HOA. Apparently there are a total of 3 houses in my neighborhood not part of the HOA, and I was fortunate enough to have bought one of them. Ever previous owner refused to sign into the HOA, and I have continued this tradition. Best part is getting all sorts of fines, letters, and people knocking on my door informing me of stupid trivial violation. I just get to laugh at them while I explain I'm not a member of their stupid little club and therefore not beholden to its rules. At one point they had my truck towed out of my driveway because of the HOA's no truck policy. I simply called the cops and reported it stolen. It was found at a local impound lot, and returned to me free of charge. The HOA ended up having to pay for the tow impound fees, and tried on several occasions to pass those on to me through fines. Finally had a lawyer write up a cease and desist letter telling them to leave me alone or I'll press charges for the theft of my truck and harassment. That was 6 months ago, and I think they finally figured out they have no authority to tell me squat because I haven't heard from them since. I was just learning to drive and parked my car too far away from the curb. Parents and neighbors didn't get along, so neighbors measured the distance from the wheels to the curb and parents got fined. Now I live in the country with pretty much no rules. We have goats and emus in our front yard.